Not every game is remembered. Most are played, scored, and forgotten. But some nights rise above the schedule and become cinema. Stories told in sweat, silence, and thunder. January 11th, 1997 was one of those nights. The United Center was more than an arena. It was a stage where destiny would be tested. From the tunnel emerged Michael Jordan, not just a man in uniform, but a presence, a storm wrapped in number 23. His every move was a frame and a masterpiece. The glide like a camera pan across open hardwood, the fadeaway a slow-motion cut that froze defenders in disbelief. The steal a sudden jump scare, the three-pointer a final shot, fading into black. Opposite him stood three giants, Charles Barkley, Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, a super team forged to challenge the throne.
This when I knew Michael Jordan was crazy. Michael's the most competitive person I've ever been around in my life.
But could three legends rewrite the script? Or would Jordan remind the world that the ending always belonged to him? Not every game is remembered. Most are played, scored, and quickly forgotten. But some nights refuse to fade. They rise above the schedule, etched into memory like film reels spinning in slow motion. Stories told in sweat, silence, and thunder. January 11th, 1997 was one of those nights. The United Center was not just an arena. It was a cathedral glowing in the icy Chicago winter, its lights burning like spotlights over hardwood that had become sacred ground. The crowd did not come simply to watch a game. They came to witness an event, the kind of clash that felt like history pressing itself into the present. Every ticket carried the weight of expectation. Every cheer hinted at something larger than basketball. And from the tunnel emerged Michael Jordan, not merely a player, but a presence. He wasn't introduced. He was revealed. The number 23 jersey was more than fabric. It was an omen. His movements were deliberate, his eyes cold, his aura heavy. You can just feel it in the air tonight. Jordan isn't here to play. He's here to deliver a message. Jordan's style was unmistakable. The glide across the lane felt like a tracking shot, smooth and cinematic. The fadeaway was a slow-motion cut, time itself bending as defenders froze, reaching helplessly into air already conquered. The sudden steal became a jump scare, rhythm broken, possession snatched like fate itself had changed hands. And when the ball left his fingertips for a dagger three-pointer, it was always the same ending. The screen faded to black, the net snapped like fire, and another defender was written out of the script. But this night was not built for Jordan alone. Opposite him waited three giants, three names carved into the walls of the game. Charles Barkley, the bruising bull whose brute force could bend the paint. Hakeem Olajuwon, the dream whose footwork carved poetry beneath the rim. And Clyde Drexler, the soaring rival once branded the other Jordan. Together, they formed a super team meant to dethrone Chicago's dynasty.
Clyde was a threat. I'm not saying he wasn't a threat, but me being compared to him, I took offense to that.
Even the broadcasters hinted at the stakes. This feels like a finals game in January. One voice declared, if Houston wants to prove they can handle the Bulls, it starts tonight. Another chimed in, but when you face Michael Jordan in this building, under these lights, history tells us there's only one ending. Three legends, three Hall of Famers, one mission. They believed they could bend history. They believed they could make Jordan mortal. But could even three stars united rewrite the script? Or was this the night the world would be reminded, once again, that inevitability has a name, and it wears number 23? Houston surged. Clyde Drexler, never one to be forgotten, rose on the wing and drilled a deep three, a shot that felt borrowed from the future, more 21st century than 1990s. His release was smooth, almost casual, but the ball ripped through the net like a warning. We're here, and we're coming for you. Then came Hakeem. The Dream's fadeaways weren't just baskets, they were whispers from history. Each turn, each pivot, carried echoes of his twin finals MVPs, those glorious years when Houston reigned while Jordan chased baseball dreams. His footwork was poetry, his touch velvet, his dominance inevitable. When the ball reached him in the post, Bulls defenders braced themselves, knowing resistance often meant futility. Charles Barkley, meanwhile, chose force over finesse. He lowered his shoulder and bullied his way into the paint, his broad frame bouncing defenders like pebbles off a tank. Rodman clawed, Pippen swiped, but Barkley powered through, grunting as he muscled the ball to the glass. For every elegant move Hakeem spun, Barkley offered a hammer blow. Together, they gave Houston balance, grace and brutality side by side. Yet Michael kept responding, like a conductor refusing to let the orchestra lose tempo. He was not only scoring, he was orchestrating. A steal here, a surgical assist there, and then the mid-range jumper, falling as naturally as rain sliding down glass. He was everywhere at once, feeding Bill Wennington at the elbow, slashing through the lane before dishing to Kerr in the corner, then pivoting back to the post to drop a fadeaway in Drexler's face. Every time Houston looks like they're taking control, one voice said. Michael Jordan pulls it right back. The other leaned into the moment, adding words that captured the truth of the era.
But because Jordan and the Bulls transcended all that, they were a pop culture touchstone in the 90s.
At halftime, the scoreboard told one story. Rockets 43, Bulls 40. But the eyes told another. Houston walked into the tunnel with a slim lead, yet Chicago carried something heavier, momentum. Because Michael wasn't just scoring, he was dictating. He was pulling invisible strings, bending the game to his will as if the court itself belonged to him. The United Center faithful felt it. They leaned forward with every possession, holding their breath on each dribble. The air was thick, electric, charged with the sense that something bigger than basketball was unfolding. Every bounce of the ball felt like a riddle, every shot a question. Could Houston's three stars, united in purpose, really hold out for 48 minutes? Or were they already breathing the thin, suffocating air of inevitability, the atmosphere that always surrounded Michael Jordan in his building, on his stage? The third quarter opened like a heavyweight fight entering its most dangerous rounds. Scottie Pippen set the tone. Catching the ball at the top of the key, he didn't hesitate, rose up, squared, and buried a clean three. The United Center erupted. The commentary followed instantly. Pippen for three? Yes. And that's a big one for Chicago. Moments later, Michael Jordan answered his teammate's call. From nearly the same spot, he rose, body balanced perfectly, and drained a jumper with the kind of inevitability only Jordan carried. The announcer's voice carried the weight of recognition. And now Jordan. Back-to-back daggers for the Bulls. The 1-2 punch is alive and well in Chicago. But Houston wasn't folding. Hakeem Olajuwon planted himself on the block, his footwork as precise as ballet. One spin, a pivot, a gentle fade, and the shot arced over outstretched hands. Swish. Olajuwon. That's vintage dream shake. For years, Olajuwon had been the league's answer in Jordan's absence, a champion whose elegance carried Houston to the top. And his mentality was as unshakable as his footwork. He once explained it himself.
Anybody ever intimidate you?
Well, intimidation, it becomes a mind game where you have to rely on your own ability and conditioning, and that's what's important. As long as I'm in condition, and the rest is just competition, and just compete.
And on this January night, he embodied those words. No flinch, no fear, just compete. Charles Barkley added his own signature style, crashing into the paint like a wrecking ball. Rodman leaned, shoved, clawed, but Barkley powered through, tossing in a tough layup off the glass. Barkley muscling his way in, the Rockets' big three showing why they're Hall of Famers. The Rockets had answers, but Jordan had a language all his own. He began carving the defense, slipping into spaces that shouldn't have existed. First came a silky spin move into a layup, body twisting midair, finishing softly at the rim. Next trip, he drew a double team and kicked it out to Steve Kerr, who calmly buried a three. The commentary rose with every play. Jordan creating, Kerr finishes. That's classic Bulls basketball. Then came the inevitable solo act. With Randy Livingston hounding him, Jordan jab stepped, rose, and buried a mid-range jumper anyway. And Jordan again. How do you guard that? You simply can't. It was a battle of styles, but more than that, it was a battle of wills. Houston fought with the power of champions. Jordan answered with inevitability, and as the quarter wore on, one truth became harder to ignore. The Rockets could compete, but Jordan controlled. And yet, this was no ordinary opponent. Clyde Drexler stood across from him, a mirror in more ways than one. Jordan himself once admitted it.
Somewhat of a mirror of being, in a sense. I mean, he's so versatile. He plays offense, he plays defense, he's good with assists, he can score, so you got to respect him in all areas of basketball. I'm just going to try to contain him as much as possible. Try to force him to shoot the outside shot, as most people try to force me to shoot the outside shot, and force him to his weaker hand, which is left. And that's what people do to me, so hopefully it can work against him.
That respect ran deep, but on this night, mirrors shattered. Drexler drained a deep three, the announcer crying, "Drexler from downtown!" But Jordan's response was swift, merciless. He caught the ball on the wing, slipped past his man, and buried another jumper. The announcer's laugh carried disbelief. And Jordan answers. He has an answer for everything. By the midpoint of the quarter, it was clear. Houston's stars were shining, but Chicago's stars burned brighter. Jordan wasn't simply scoring. He was dictating. His fingerprints were on every possession. A rebound here, a steal there, a pass to Pippen, a dagger of his own. He wasn't chasing the game. He was pulling it toward him, dragging the Rockets into his orbit. The tension was no longer about who would lead. It was about who could survive. And as the quarter wound down, the question wasn't whether Jordan would respond to Houston. It was how much longer Houston could endure. The fourth quarter was Jordan's kingdom. Where others saw pressure, he saw opportunity. Where others tightened up, he expanded. Those final minutes weren't just the end of a game. They were his stage, his hunting ground, the place where legends were made and opponents were undone. With just over 3 minutes left, the ball swung to him on the right wing. Instantly, the United center seemed to rise as one, sensing destiny at work. Jordan squared, focused, and without the faintest pause, one dribble, one release. The ball sliced through the air as if the rim had been waiting for it all along. Net, not a swish, a thunderclap, 1-3. Houston staggered. But Jordan wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want control, he wanted the kill. Seconds later, the ball found him again. This time at the top of the arc, he rose. Form flawless, follow through frozen in perfection. Swish. Back-to-back daggers in under a minute. No iron, no doubt, no mercy. This wasn't scoring anymore. This was sentencing. Look at the Rockets. Clyde Drexler's eyes drifted downward, searching for an answer that didn't exist. Charles Barkley, the bull who had battered defenses for years, could only shrug helplessly. Even Hakeem Olajuwon, the dream himself, stood still, shoulders heavy, eyes hollow. You could almost feel the weight in the air, the realization sinking in. They had tried everything, and nothing was enough. They threw the book at him. Double teams, traps, rotating defenders, crowding the paint. None of it mattered. He sliced through it all like paper before a blade, and with each basket, it felt less like a game and more like a storm rolling in, a force of nature swallowing everything in its path. The commentators mirrored the madness. Their voices cracked, trembling with disbelief. Jordan again, another three. He's taken over and Houston has no answers. Oh, then another, gasping. He's not just beating them, he's breaking them. The Rockets' body language told the truth. Shoulders sagged. Eyes flickered. Conversations died into silence. They weren't just losing on the scoreboard. They were being broken in their souls. And in that silence, you could almost hear the sound of inevitability. The sound of one man bending the will of an entire team. When the horn finally sounded, the box score was neat, tidy, 32 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. For anyone else, the game of a lifetime. For Michael Jordan, just another chapter. Because numbers couldn't capture what really happened. They couldn't bottle the electricity, the roar, the sense that the crowd wasn't just cheering, they were bearing witness. This wasn't just a win. It was a reminder, a warning carved into hardwood. Against Michael Jordan, even 3 Hall of Famers united could not tip the balance. He stood apart, he stood above, and he finished them. And so the question has never been what happened on January 11, 1997. That's already written in the box score. Bulls victorious, Rockets humbled. The real question, the one that still aches in the hearts of those who watched, is this. If 3 legends together couldn't stop him, whoever could? And maybe Charles Barkley himself captured the futility best in a story he retold years later. During a heated game against Jordan, frustration poured out in the huddle. Charles is yelling. Jordan recalled.
And Charles is yelling. I can hear him yelling in the huddle. So I'm like, who's gonna guard this guy? Somebody's gotta guard this guy. That's all right. I guard this guy.
It was classic Barkley, fearless, proud, never backing down from a fight. But the truth lingered beneath his bravado. Barkley could try. Drexler could try. Olajuwon could try. They all could. And still, it would never be enough. Because guarding Jordan wasn't about one possession. It wasn't about standing in front of him. It was about surviving the storm. And history has shown no one ever truly did. That's why this night, like so many others in Jordan's career, remains eternal. Not just because of the shots he made or the points he scored, but because of what he represented. Inevitability, the weight of greatness, the cold, relentless truth that when he decided a game was his, it already was. 3 Hall of Famers stood in his way, and all 3 fell. And the echoes of that night still whisper through the game today. Because in the end, the story wasn't about Barkley or Olajuwon or Drexler. It was about Michael Jordan, about the way he turned even giants into shadows, about the way he left opponents not just beaten but broken, and about the question that still hangs decades later unanswered. If 3 legends couldn't stop him, whoever could? What made Michael Jordan different wasn't just what he did, it was how he did it. His fadeaway wasn't just a shot, it was a lyric, written mid-air, punctuated by the snap of the net. His drives weren't just points, they were crescendos, rising louder with each dribble, lifting the entire arena with him. His steals weren't just defensive stops, they were percussion crashes, sudden thunderclaps that flipped momentum in an instant. Against Houston, his game wasn't basketball, it was music. The Rockets came armed with their own instruments. Charles Barkley brought brute force, pounding the paint like heavy bass drums. Hakeem Olajuwon provided the steady rhythm, a heartbeat of post moves, patient footwork, and quiet dominance. Clyde Drexler slashed with high notes, his long strides cutting through the floor like a saxophone wail. Together they played in unison, a super team built to overwhelm, to drown out any challenger. But Jordan layered melody over all of it. He didn't just play along, he rewrote the composition. He turned their noise into harmony of his own making. He improvised like a jazz soloist, shifting tempo, weaving sequences, bending rhythm to his will. While the Rockets thought they were dictating the score, Jordan was composing the masterpiece. When he posted up Mario Eli, it wasn't just a possession, it was a verse, calm and deliberate, setting the tone. When he spun past Drexler's reach, slipping through arms that had corralled so many others, it was the bridge, fluid, unexpected, building tension. And when he rose for that final 3-pointer, the crowd holding its breath, it was the chorus. The moment everyone remembered, the anthem that echoed long after the lights dimmed. Each shot was a bar, each sequence, a stanza, each quarter, a movement and a symphony only Jordan could conduct. And then came the crescendo, the 4th quarter, 22 points in 12 furious minutes, every note sharper, every sound louder, until the entire arena shook like an orchestra at full tilt. The Rockets tried to adjust, to disrupt the music, double teams, traps, bodies thrown his way, but it was too late. The composition was already written. Jordan wasn't following their score, he was writing his own. By the time the final horn sounded, the Rockets had been drowned out, their rhythm shattered, their harmony silenced. Barkley's power, Drexler's slashing, Olajuwon's control, all of it faded into background noise. Because Jordan had taken the night, woven it into his own performance, and turned it into something greater than basketball. It wasn't just a win, it was art. A performance layered into memory, a masterpiece carved into hardwood, a score only Jordan could write. And decades later, it still plays back in whispers, in highlights, in the roar of a crowd that knew, even then, they were witnessing not just a player, not just a victory, but the sound of greatness itself. Consider this. During Jordan's first retirement, Houston reigned. 2 straight rings, 2 parades. A city crowned champion while Chicago was left asking what if. And for a moment, the league whispered that maybe the Rockets had built the one dynasty Jordan could never break. But imagine if he had never stepped away. Would Olajuwon still have danced freely in the post, spinning defenders into dust? Would Drexler's Blazers or Barkley's Suns ever have tasted even a flicker of hope? Or would Chicago have marched on, title after title, 8 for 8, leaving no air, no oxygen, for anyone else to breathe? On January 11th, 1997, the answer to that hypothetical took shape on the hardwood. Houston came armed with 3 Hall of Famers, Olajuwon, Drexler, Barkley, a trio that once ruled the league in Jordan's absence. But on that night, under the lights of the United Center, they collided with reality. Jordan didn't just play against them, he eclipsed them. And it wasn't just about the box score. His dominance couldn't be measured in numbers alone. It was about the weight of presence, about the way Jordan bent games, the way gravity bends light. You could resist, you could fight, but in the end, Everything curved toward him, every possession, every outcome. That night wasn't just another win, it was a reminder of what the league had missed in those 2 years. A warning that as long as Michael Jordan was on the floor, no dynasty could rise, no throne could be shared. Sports are littered with nights that fade away. Regular season games that vanish into the calendar, forgotten before the next tip-off. But every so often, a night refuses to leave. This night refuses, because Barkley, Olajuwon, and Drexler weren't just opponents, they were icons. Titans. Names carved into the pillars of the game. The kind of players who usually bend nights to their own will. Who impose their greatness until the scoreboard bends with it. But not tonight. On this night, all three bent to someone else's. Jordan didn't just beat them. He stripped away their power. He dismantled them, piece by piece, as if to prove a point only he could make. That even the mightiest together still weren't enough against him alone. And that's why, decades later, when the debate sparks about who stands as the greatest, fans don't just point to the 6 championships, or the 5 MVPs, or the endless accolades. They point to nights like this, the nights when the game slowed, when the stage swelled, when one man took on giants and walked away untouchable. Because this night wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about the 32 points, the rebounds, the assists. It was about presence. It was about inevitability. It was about the feeling that no matter who stood in front of him, whether it was Barkley with his power, Olajuwon with his grace, or Drexler with his speed, the ending had already been written. And so the questions echo still. How does one man undo 3 legends? How does inevitability look when it wears a number 23 jersey? And if they, together, couldn't stop him, then whoever could? The truth is, no one ever did. And maybe that's why this night remains, etched not just in the record books, but in memory, in myth, in the very soul of basketball. Because it wasn't just about Jordan conquering opponents, it was about him conquering doubt itself, and reminding the world that sometimes greatness is not a debate, it's a fact. On January 11, 1997, the United Center became more than an arena. It became a courtroom. The Houston Rockets arrived with 3 Hall of Fame witnesses, ready to challenge Michael Jordan's supremacy. They left as evidence. Jordan's 32 points weren't just buckets, they were declarations. Each fadeaway said, "You can't stop me." Each of the 3 whispered, "You can't match me." Ik steel road. You can't outrun me. Against the combined might of Barkley's muscle, Olajuwon's artistry, and Drexler's elegance, Michael proved the simplest truth. Greatness doesn't bow. Why is Michael Jordan the greatest? Because nights like these weren't anomalies. They were habits. Because even against 3 legends, he didn't flinch. Because he wasn't just playing basketball, he was rewriting its history, one shot at a time. That's why this wasn't just a regular season game. It was a masterpiece. A reminder. A warning. And most of all, proof that when Michael Jordan stepped onto the court, the outcome wasn't in doubt. It was destiny.